OpenAI had to publish an emergency blog post this week explaining why their AI kept talking about goblins. I'm not kidding, goblins, gremlins, trolls, pigeons. Their flagship coding model developed a creature obsession. So weird that engineers had to write hidden instructions in the system prompt, literally begging it to stop. But here's the thing, buried inside that ridiculous story is one of the most important warnings about how modern AI actually works, and it connects to a much bigger shift that happened this week. Because this wasn't just another news cycle, this was the week AI stopped being a startup experiment and quietly become critical global infrastructure. The week the rules changed. The week that even people building these systems admitted they didn't fully understand what they've made. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to walk you through 3 stories from this week that, on the surface, look totally unrelated. But when you put them together, you can see the entire AI industry growing up in real time. OpenAI CFO just called AI demand a vertical wall. GPU rental prices are up to 40% in 6 months, and you literally cannot buy a Mac Mini right now. Okay, so let's start the part of the story that nobody wants to admit out loud. There is no AI bubble. I know, controversial. Every other tech podcast had spent the last 6 months waiting for the pop. But the numbers from this week make it almost impossible to argue that anymore. Google Cloud just grew 63% year over year. That's not a typo, 63%. One analysis said the backlog looks fake because it's growing exponentially. Microsoft Azure up 40%, AWS up 28%. Its best quarter since 2021. The combined annual revenue of just 2 AI labs is now somewhere around $60 billion. And on the supply side, GPU render prices are up to 40% in the last 6 months alone. Amazon CEO Andy Jassy basically said on these earnings that they will sell every single Trainium chip they can produce for the foreseeable future. You literally cannot buy a Mac Mini from Apple right now. They are back ordered for months. Tim Cook had to address it on earnings call. The actual physical device that AI runs on are gone. Here's why this matters. For the last 2 years, every single one of us has been getting a discount on AI. Every $20 ChatGPT subscription, every Claude Pro plan, every Cursor seat. Companies were eating the cost because they were betting on growth, on a scale, on figuring out the economics later. That era is ending right now, this week. In a world where demand for AI tokens is genuinely infinite, where every token a company can produce, someone will pay for, the math for flat rate, all you can eat pricing breaks down. And what's coming next? A power shift you've already started seeing if you're paying attention. Let me show you what I mean. Anthropic is now reportedly raising at a $350 billion valuation. The US government just blocked one of their models, and OpenAI quietly divorced Microsoft. The AI power map is redrawn this week. So when an industry has more demand than it can possibly serve, 3 things always happen. Money pours in, power consolidates, and governments start paying attention. All 3 happened this week. Let's start with the money. According to reports from Bloomberg and TechCrunch, this week Anthropic, that's the company behind Claude, is in talks to raise a valuation of somewhere between $350 and $400 billion. Some sources are saying they're trying to rise up to $50 billion in single round. To put that in perspective, that will put Anthropic ahead of OpenAI's last official valuation, and its secondary markets where employees and early investors trade their shares. Anthropic stock is reportedly trading at prices that imply a valuation as high as $1 trillion, a trillion with a T, for the company that 3 years ago most people have never heard of. Now, the second power move this week, the one almost nobody talked about, is what's happening between OpenAI and Microsoft. They officially restructured their partnership. Microsoft gets free access to their latest models for another 5 years. Plus, they killed that weird AGI clauses that could cut them off whenever OpenAI decided that hit artificial general intelligence. But here's the part that matters. OpenAI is now free to sell their models through Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud. Translation: OpenAI is too big for any single cloud providers to serve. Think about that. The company has outgrown the largest cloud platforms on earth. That's not a startup story anymore. That is infrastructure, and here's where it gets really interesting, because when something becomes infrastructure, governments start paying attention, and this week, for the first time that we know of, the United States government actively blocked the rollout of an AI model. The model is called Mythos. It's Anthropic's most advanced internal system, currently in restricted preview to about 70 companies. Earlier in the week, Axios reported the White House was working on a plan to expand Mythos access to government agencies. By the end of this week, the story flipped. Administration officials told Anthropic they opposed the expansion, citing national security concerns and worries about compute scarcity. AI policy expert Dean Ball wrote that this is effectively the United States' first informal AI licensing regime. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, the training wheels just came out of AI policy. The trial runs are over, so that's a two-act of growing up. Demand outpacing supply, power consolidating into a handful of companies that are now operating like critical national infrastructures. But the third story this week, it happened inside the models themselves, and it is the weirdest one of all. If you're following along, hit subscribe because this kind of pattern recognition across the news is exactly what we do here every week. Now, let me tell you about the Goblins. A few days ago, a developer on Twitter spotted something bizarre in the system prompt for ChatGPT 5.5's Codex model. There was a hidden instruction that read roughly, never talk about goblins, gremlins, raccoons, trolls, pigeons, or other creatures unless absolutely irrelevant to the user's query. That line was actually duplicated in the prompt twice. Engineers were so worried about the goblin problem that they wrote it in there twice for the emphasis. Wired picked it up. The headline was, I kid you not, OpenAI really wants Codex to shut up about goblins. And the OpenAI itself published an explainer title where the goblins came from. Here's what they figured out. Starting in version 5.1, their model began making strange creature themes metaphors, sprinkling goblins and gremlins into responses. At first, it seemed charming, a single goblin reference here and there, but across model generation, it kept multiplying. By version 5.4, it was everywhere. The cause? OpenAI had been training a nerdy personality variant of their models, and that variant was rewarded during reinforcement learning for using cute creature references. The problem is modern AI models are built on top of other models. They share training infrastructure, and the goblin loving signal, that nerdy personality, bled into the main Codex model through a process nobody had fully predicted. Now, on the surface, funny story, right? Goblins, pigeons, hilarious. But think about what it actually reveals. Here you have one of the most important, most sophisticated AI labs in the world with billions of dollars, and the smartest researchers on planet had developed a creature fixation until users on Twitter pointed out. If a problem that obvious can slip through that kind of training process, what else might be slipping through? What other subtle behaviors are these models picking up from training that the people building them haven't noticed yet? That is the third act of AI growing up, not just market reality, not just power consolidation, but the sobering recognition that the systems we're building are now complex enough that even their creators are sometimes surprised by what comes out the other side. So zoom out with me now for a second. What did this week actually tell us? Demand has hit a vertical wall. The biggest companies on earth are restructuring billion-dollar deals because their AI partners outgrow them. Governments are quietly putting up gates. And the models themselves are developing behavior their own creators can't fully explain. This isn't the AI of 2023 anymore. The wow, look at this chatbot era is over. We are now in an era where AI is critical infrastructure, geopolitical leverage, and something genuinely strange and powerful all at the same time. If this kind of breakdown is useful for you, making sense of the noise instead of just listening headlines, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. I do this every week, and drop a comment telling me which of these three stories surprised you the most. Was it the demand wall, the power shift, or the goblins? I'll see you in the next one.